Imagine juggling a demanding career while navigating the unpredictable needs of an aging loved one. You are not alone. 73% of employees face this reality, a silent majority carrying the weight of caregiving responsibilities. But what if your workplace could be a source of support, not stress? Today, we unlock the power of ERGs, explore hidden benefits, and equip you with the tools to advocate for change. Whether you're currently balancing both workloads or looking to re enter the workforce after a caregiving pause, discover how to thrive, not just survive, in the face of life's most profound challenges. Welcome to Fading Memories, your source for all things dementia caregiving. I'm your host, Jen Fink, and I have had 3 generations of loved ones with dementia, and I'm here to share the knowledge I've gained with you. Welcome back, Fading Memories listeners. This is Jen Fink, your caregiving host and best friend. With me today is Zach Demopoulos. He is the author of the book, The Hidden Employee. Hope I got that right because it's been a year since I've read it. And amongst other things. And we're going to be talking today about the benefits you can get at work, how to get an ERG that helps support you, and what to do to better position yourself if you're trying to get back into the workforce after caregiving. So thanks for joining me, Zach.
Well, pleasure to be your host and best friend. Thank you.
I like to refer to myself as a caregiver best friend. I think I screwed that up, but that's okay. So let's see. Let's back up. Tell us your story, your history, and then how, I bet you that ties into how you end up writing the book.
It does. Thank you again for having me here. And thank you, Jen, for all that you do, for all your listeners and for all caregivers out there, because there's 53 million of them out there, right? So that's 2020. We're going to be getting a new report in 2025 this year. Jason Resendez has promised us that from the National Alliance for Caregiving. And I imagine those numbers are going to grow astronomically. So 53 million caregivers out there. So thank you on behalf of all of them, what you do. And I'm a caregiver myself. So I'll back up. I'll tell you, I started in corporate America. I was in pharmaceuticals. I started in sales and then went into management. But my true love was human resources. I spent over 15 years in human resources. And I absolutely loved it. There's nothing like sitting down, working with a manager and helping them create a team, develop a team, retain a team, and how to deal with the work life as well as the personal life. So I kind of understood that from back then. And when I left corporate America to have a better personal life, I started my own business with my wife, and that was a home care business. So for 13 years, we took care of over 15 families, 500 families here in New Jersey, and hired over 700 professional caregivers. So that's quite a bit of experience, quite a bit of stories, working caregiver stories. So I really grew a deep appreciation and respect for the caregiving role, both professionally and unpaid family member, as well as, of course, respect for the care recipient who is just trying to live independently with some dignity at home.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that for 13 years, and I was also a personal caregiver. My father, 78 years old, never been sick a day in his life, really stubborn, tough Greek immigrant, smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day, had high blood pressure, worked in a restaurant, high stress. Why weren't we prepared? We weren't. So he had a massive stroke at age 78 in North Carolina. I'm in New Jersey. I'm the youngest of 3 kids, but somehow I got drafted into the caregiving role over a 3-minute phone call. My brother called me and panicked and said, I need to get down there, which I did. I jumped on a plane and went down there. And I became a long-distance caregiver, helping my mother care for my father. My father survived 6 years. I made a lot of mistakes as a caregiver, including not keeping my siblings in the loop, not asking them to help me, never saying no, never setting boundaries. I started feeling the physical effects, emotional, mental effects, and I started feeling the financial effects. And I have my own family, my own 3 children and my wife to also worry about. So it was quite a challenge. I learned a lot my first go round as a caregiver. After my father passed away, I became the primary long distance caregiver for my mother. And I was much better at being a caregiver for her than I was the first go round. And so I sold my business and I took 2 years off. I actually went down to North Carolina almost every month just to be with my mother. I moved her 4 times
Oof.
during the pandemic. Yeah, from trying to live alone at home. She got hospitalized 3 times in 4 months for
Oof.
dehydration and UTIs. She has chronic UTIs. So that was not going to work. And she didn't want anybody coming to the house. So you can no longer live at home, Mom. And she's also a stubborn Greek immigrant person who I am so appreciative for both of them for all the hard work they've done in their lives. So the least I could do is try to take care of them. And again, I'm the advocate as well as the caregiver for her. I moved her from home to an independent living, from independent living to assisted living, from assisted living to a nursing home, which is where she's at now. And by the way, I just came back last week after spending 3 days with her. Her skin looks better than mine. She's 95 years old. They are taking very good care of her. Of course, like I said, I'm doing things a lot better this go round. I have very good relationships with the executive director, the social worker, the activity director, the head of nursing, the caregivers, pretty much everybody that I need to, physical therapists, occupational therapists, they know me. I'm not a complainer. I'm not one of those pain in the butt caregivers. But when I do call and have an issue, they know they know I'm serious. And so they do take very good care of Mom. And I'm very appreciative of that. But I took 2 years off, Jen, and I spent a lot of time getting to meet people like yourself, caregiver advocates who are trying to make a difference in the world. And I've gotten to know quite a few of them, did a lot of research. Meanwhile, an old friend of mine named Selma Archer, who used to be in the legal department at Pfizer, and I was in the HR department. She's a lawyer and I'm an HR person. And so we would run into each other all the time and we're good friends. And then we both left that organization and we hadn't talked for almost 10 years. And one day, through LinkedIn, we get on the phone. I'm driving to work and she's out running her half marathon that she runs every morning near you up somewhere in north central California. And we spent an hour and a half on the phone. And we shared our caregiver stories with each other. She had a mother that she had to quit her job as a lawyer to be with her mother in Tennessee from California. And we both shared these stories, and we were shocked that we never shared these stories with each other before. There was never a reason. We weren't comfortable with it back in, the early 2000s. So long story short, the two of us said, you know what, we need to write a book about this. So we started writing a book. And the book took 6 years because it was a part-time job, right? And the book originally was going to be for caregivers. Now, if you go and look up books for caregivers, there's quite a few.
Yep.
There's quite a few. And the more conversations I had with people like yourself, caregiver advocates, and research, I realizing that I think we needed to change the direction of our book. We needed to. The reader needed to be more somebody from an employer side, somebody from HR, from benefits, from management, leadership, somebody who is a working caregiver. And we thought we would we thought that we'd make a bigger impact by speaking to large organizations and helping them figure out ways to help working caregivers like myself and like Selma, not have to quit our jobs or not have to suffer with all the things that we had to suffer as working caregivers. So our book, which again, you were close, hidden in the closet, in the shadows, we call them invisible employees, but Working Caregivers, Invisible Employees was born in late 2023. And we were, if you read it, it's a fast 120-page book. It's basically written like a narrative about two characters, Mel and Carrie. Both of them are working caregivers. And in each chapter, we alternate each chapter, telling a story about Mel, telling a story about Carrie, and how they have to be caregivers and work. And we also add research to each chapter and also some key takeaways so that anyone reading this book, whether you're a working caregiver, a caregiver, or a person who's never caregived in their whole life, this will help you realize you're not alone. It will raise your awareness, give you some tools as to how to better either manage, lead people, keep people, retain people, recruit people, or just maybe even find ways to stay in your job or find a job after you've been out of it for a couple of years. So, and we've had some very good success with the book as far as people reading it and wanting us to come and speak to their organizations and do webinars and really talk about the subject. So we're very happy about that.
Well, I read it, like I said, a year ago, because I talk to so many people that it concerns me. You know, my daughter's a millennial. She's 33. She'll be 34 at the end of this year. And we've got more millennials caring for people. And a lot of them have to leave work. And it's like, they're going to try to go back to the workforce in their 40s after, 5, 7, 10-year gap. That's not going to be easy. And so that's how I stumbled across your book. It's digital, so I can't share it on the screen. But I think you and I have had, there you go. I got to get it in focus.
I never know how to do that. There we go.
There you go. Right in front of your face.
This
works.
never leaves my side. It's just such a great, it's like a handbook. It really is. And we're going to have to probably update it pretty soon because there's a lot of 2020 stats in there. So we'll have to do a second edition.
Well, you were talking about 53 million caregivers. I can almost promise you that that's an undercount because so many people don't identify as a caregiver. I didn't. My dad passed away. I just wanted to do the best job I could for my mom. And it wasn't until I went to my first Alzheimer's Association support group that I learned, oh, yeah, you are actually a caregiver. I'm like, oh, okay. So I'd already been, neck deep in her needs. My dad was the primary caregiver, obviously. And so I just honestly think there's probably an awful lot of people, older generation probably, that don't identify as a caregiver. Some people probably don't want to identify. They're like, no, I'm the spouse, I'm the daughter, son, whatever. And so I think that's a real undercount. That's my humble opinion. And people don't get formal diagnosis. So if you don't get a formal diagnosis, you may also not have the knowledge that your relationship now also includes caregiving.
Yeah. And there's so many different roles of a caregiver, right? Whether there's a diagnosis or not. I mean, people never look at themselves as caregivers if they're leaving work to go take mom or dad to an appointment, or picking up medication on the way home, or going and checking on them on the weekends. Why would you consider yourself a caregiver? You're just being a child, a son, a daughter, a sibling, checking in until that event occurs, and then we're not prepared because things turn upside down. So that's where we start thinking, maybe I am a caregiver, or you start hearing, podcasts like yourself or reading books, and then you're like, oh, I can identify with this. But yeah, early on, which I hope, by doing these interviews and talking more about it, we will help people realize that it's almost inevitable to become a caregiver. You're going to become one, unfortunately and fortunately, sooner or later. So it's best to prepare for it now.
Oh, definitely. And it may not, you might be one of the few. It doesn't affect your family, but it might affect your friend's family or your coworker's family or your neighbor. I look back on like my junior high and high school years, and our next door neighbor lost her husband. They were huge smokers, and I think they were fairly big drinkers as well. And she got just batty. The little people were living behind the baseboards. People were spying on her through the TV. And, she's driving around in her car with the oxygen tank, which my understanding is that's not really a good idea. And just bonkers. And then I don't even remember what happened to her. Because they didn't have children either. So this was in the mid 80s. So this definitely different time than now, 40 plus years later. And it wasn't, well, no, I guess it was about 15 years, and my maternal grandmother ended up with vascular dementia. Eventually, it touched our lives a lot more than I was aware of until, you start looking back and you're like, oh, wait a minute, the next door neighbor was the little people living behind the baseboards, and just nutty.
I tell you, I'm not a betting man, but I'm willing to bet that almost everyone will be impacted by caregiving. I mean, the statistic that really is shocking to me is by 2034, which is only
9 years.
9 years from now, there will be more people 65 years and older than 18 and younger. And it'll be the first time in history that that's ever occurred in this country. So I'm willing to bet whether you're a spouse, a sibling, a neighbor, a friend, a parent, a child, you're going to be impacted by caregiving.
Yep, I agree. And it's supposed to increase 45%. The number of cases is supposed to increase about 45% the next 5 years. So that's bad. And then double it by 2060, which is equally not great. And my paternal grandmother lived to 103, mind intact.
Wow.
That's
Wow.
my goal. And so that means I will still be around in 2060. I won't be a spring chicken, that's for sure.
Have fun. I won't be, but have fun.
I got too much
Or
to
maybe,
do.
maybe actually, if I do the math, I mean, my mother's 95. God bless her. I mean, she doesn't walk and is in a wheelchair. And those are only two things. And other than that, she's got as sharp as a whip, um, and kind of running that joint over there where she's at. So,
And you and I had similar experiences. So I learned really quickly watching other families in mom's memory care community. They seemed, and this isn't necessarily a criticism because of the amount of money that's spent, but they seemed very entitled to, I need this, mom needs that, just kind of snap to take care, and then they would leave. And I'm like, you've just kind of ticked off the staff and you've left and your mom is here. And that doesn't seem very smart. So I ended up I had a great relationship with the executive director. I had relationships with all of the care staff, and I would go visit. When I'd show up, they were in the middle of switching shifts. So I knew quite a number of people on the morning shift, and obviously the ones that were in the afternoon when I was there. A few from the evening because I sometimes had to go back if for some reason. And it was really hard after my mom passed away. My mom passed away at the start of the pandemic. And, all of a sudden it was like I didn't have her. I didn't have Monday visits with her. I didn't know what was going on with my favorite caregivers. It was a real blow. And memory care was the best place for my mom. She had friends. She got into trouble, good trouble, nothing serious, just mischief. And so I'm working on a book too, and it's taking forever, but it hasn't taken 6 years yet. So you're giving me hope.
Excellent. Keep going. Everybody has a book out there. Just get it out there. Someone's going to need to read it. So
what I want to do is write. So all of the different characters, one of my favorites was Rose, who was the resident klepto. I got all kinds of stories about her. They're humorous, they're educational. And then after each character and their story is like, for Rose, like, why do people with dementia, quote unquote, steal? And I started writing it chronologically, and then I was getting all confused. I'm like, if I'm confused, this is not good. So I gotta revamp it. And it's all done in my head. I just need one of those chips to download what I've been thinking. But that's not what we were doing. A lot of caregivers have written books, but not everybody's got a book. Not everybody wants to write a book. Some people cannot take time off. I've talked to caregivers who are, the sole head of household and kind of hard to pay the bills if you're not working. So explain to me, because I have not been in corporate America since early 1991. Just a few years. What exactly, I know ERG stands for Employee Resource Group, but what do those actually do? Because they did not have those things back then that I'm aware of. None of the companies I worked for did anyway.
They did, actually, believe it or not, but they just weren't prominent. They just weren't talking about them. They actually started, believe it or not, in the 70s. I think Xerox was the first company to really come out with them. Yeah, remember that name?
Yep.
And but they started becoming popular in the 90s, but 2000s. And now it's taken a different direction because of all the talk about diversity. But I want to be really clear that there's a huge difference between what's going on now in terms of this country and how they're trying to reverse some of these policies and what employee resource groups value really is. I'm a huge proponent of ERGs, and I'll tell you why. I used to watch my organization, not a really big criticism of them, because this happens to most Fortune 200 companies. They spend a lot of money on marketing, on paying marketing firms to tell them what, let's say, for example, they're creating a drug for women. So they're paying marketing consulting companies large amounts of money for them to give them the studies of what women have told them about, let's say, uh, dermat dermatological care. Let's say they asked them 50 questions and here's the feedback. And I used to laugh at that. And I'm like, hey, I got an easier solution for you guys that's free
Yeah.
and will save you a lot of retention points, bonus points. Why don't you bring women that work for your organization, our organization, together, ask them the same 50 questions, collect the data, and now you have your market analysis and you've made them feel good because they've contributed towards a new product that's going to be coming out and making a difference. Whoa, this isn't rocket science. So that's essentially what employee resource groups are. It could be any affinity whatsoever. It could be anything. Of course, the typical ones that were started were race and gender, sexual orientation, cultures, traditions, but it could be anything. And the very most popular one, and I understand why you and I are talking about this, is that caregiver groups have started to form as employee resource groups. Again, the key word here is resource, employee resource group. It is a go-to for an organization to ask questions, and don't ask a question you don't want an answer to. So, for example, our benefits, we are about to evaluate them. I'm just, theoretically, hypothetically walking through something here. But let's say we're going through our benefits and we'll be rolling them out in November. And I'm like, well, our EAP program, we're not sure, is it being used or not? And so who should we ask those questions to? Now, you could do a general survey, and you know how general surveys go. Some people answer them, some won't. Some people are worried about confidentiality. But if you go to an affinity group, a group that has, I apologize, my dogs are barking like crazy. Oh, I hope I did. Oh, sorry about that. So they're my best alarm system. I don't need one. So
Yeah, me too.
yeah. So you go to an affinity group that has a vested interest in whatever it is, a policy, a benefit, perhaps it's a marketing idea, a consumer idea. So you take that to a resource group and you ask them, what can we do better? Or what are some of your ideas? Or you could just go generally speaking and say, what are some of your needs? So if you create a caregiver group, an affinity caregiver group for employee resource group, and go to them and start, say, asking them really good questions like, how can we do a better job recruiting caregivers? Working caregivers, or how can we do a better job of retaining working caregivers, or what benefits are important to you, and what benefits would you like to have, or what flexible, you're going to get the answers that you need to change your culture so you can have a culture of care. You don't need to go out and pay for that. There's tons of research out there. Harvard does phenomenal work. The Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregiving does amazing work. Family Caregiver Alliance out in California, AARP, they all do amazing work. That's not selling something, right? That's credible. But you could just go right to your own employees, and it will be more meaningful to you as an employer, but more meaningful to them. They're going to feel good that you asked them and that you're doing something about it, and could increase the chances of them staying. Because like you said earlier, this is impacting everybody, not just, middle-aged, typical. Everyone thinks the typical caregiver is a woman in her mid-50s who is married to somebody who is also a breadwinner and can stop working and go home and take care of mom or dad or an in-law. And that's just not the case. You mentioned it. Millennials who barely saved a dime have to leave their work and go care for somebody. How are they supposed to do that financially? is impossible. But they figure it out. They get by if their organizations don't support them. So that's what employee resource groups are all about. Not all companies do them. Other companies have other ways of getting this information. Some companies haven't figured it out yet and don't, but it's such an easy concept and an easy thing to do. And by the way, the other thing about employee resource groups that makes them effective is they usually have an executive sponsor. So somebody either has an affinity to the group as well, or has just been selected to be the sponsor of this group, and they could take notes and take back to the executive team, hey folks, leadership team, these are some of the things that we need to be focusing on. And that's powerful.
Yeah. We didn't have any of that where I worked, but in the late 80s, very, very early 90s, the last corporate job I had was an appraisal group, but they did like commercial real estate and heavy equipment and not like a residential home type appraising. I think they used to do mergers and acquisitions before I joined up. That was in the 80s, obviously. So some people probably have no idea what all of that's about. That's for my younger listeners. Is there a way, if you're working to, maybe you're not in the executive levels because, you got all these other responsibilities, you don't have time to do all that, to encourage your employer to start a caregiver ERG?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's certainly a way. It typically is grassroots. Sometimes it is the leadership team doing it top down, but typically the more effective ones are grassroots. So one way to get one started is, of course, to try to find others that work with you that are caregivers. However way you communicate in your organization, a lot of people have internal, chats or group discussions, just like you have on social platforms. Organizations have that. Lunch rooms, cafeterias, break rooms. There are many opportunities to see if there are others that feel the same as you, which could be a number of things. I'm alone in this. I really don't have any support. I don't know how to deal with somebody who has dementia. I don't know how to hire a home care agency. I mean, there's so many issues. And even childcare could be part of caregiving, right? Even though there's a million resources out there for childcare, but that could also be incorporated into caregiving. Caregiving is caregiving, at the end of the day.
Yeah,
So
that 73% is not just somebody like us taking care of an older adult. And I like to joke that my caregiving these days is for a 10-and-a-half-year-old golden retriever who is extraordinarily social and gets perturbed by the middle of the afternoon that I haven't stopped working to take her out. Shopping, dog park, walking, whatever, just
yeah,
get
come on,
away
Mom.
from these walls.
Come on, Mom. Come on.
Exactly.
So if you're not able to find out others who are there in your organization and work with you that have similar needs and values that you do, perhaps then have a conversation with your manager. This is ideal because it should come up sooner or later. Now, most employees, like you mentioned earlier, are hidden or invisible. They don't share with their man. I didn't share with my manager that I was leaving the next day to go to North Carolina. It's none of his business, I thought at the time. But now when I think back, I think he'd have been more supportive. He would have been more understandable when I needed to leave, because of surgeries and because of decisions, transitions of care between rehab to back home. I mean, I needed to be there for all these things. Or sometimes when I'm caught off guard in a meeting and I'm not concentrating, that's because I'm thinking about, I just called a social worker this morning. I'm expecting a call back. I can't focus. I can't concentrate on what's going on in the meetings. So, shame on me for not bringing that up to my manager. But also, our managers need to be trained and also to raise their antennas, even whether they're caregivers or not, to be aware that your employees' personal lives do matter. I know everyone thinks it's nobody's business, but how is that even possible? I mean, how is it that we could ask our employees to take on an emergency work-related item while they're on vacation, but yet we tell them you can't bring your personal life to work? That doesn't make sense to me. That's hypocritical. as you can imagine, I was a pretty tough HR guy. I really was very fair on both sides, management and employees, and I always try to see what's black and white and what makes sense. So I would suggest that a caregiver, working caregiver, go and mention this to their manager and say, "Hey, look, I just had an idea. Is it possible maybe that we could find out if there's other caregivers? Can you help me? Is what vehicle can we do? Can we do that with? Can you talk to your manager? And the higher you go, the more people that will be involved, the more idea that gets kicked around. And then, of course, there's always HR. Go to your HR representative. They should be aware of what ERGs are, and the impact and power that they have and the value that they have. But in particular, talk to your HR folks about caregiving. They really need to be brought into the loop, more so than anybody, because they're the ones that can also make an impact, especially around benefits, flexible work, care cultures. They can certainly partner up with the leadership team and do that. So yeah, there are ways. It's doesn't feel right at first. It's a little awkward because you're not talking about it. I mean, think about it. If my father just got hospitalized for a fall, and he's got a broken hip, and he's at the hospital, and he's got a bed sore, and he's just feeling horrible, am I coming back to work and showing pictures of that to my colleagues? No. But when you have a child, you're coming back and you're showing pictures. You're having a shower. Which, by the way, anytime I mention that word, I always love to shout out to my good friend and caregiver advocate, Jen Chan, um, out in California. She also works for the Family Caregiver Alliance, FCA, and she's created a product called the Senior Showers, where at work, you talk about becoming a caregiver. And you do share pictures, and you do talk about what that's like. How's that? Why, we do baby showers. Why can't we do senior showers? So those are some suggestions that an employee, and also maybe read up on it. Join some caregiver support groups. I'll do another shout out. Working Daughter. That's Liz O'Donnell, a good friend of mine who created that group many years ago. And I think they're up to, I forgot the number lately, probably 10,000 women and men that are part of this private Facebook group. Join the Facebook group and just start reading some of the posts. You'll see that you're not alone, and that somebody will vent, which is a great place to vent, but then others will come in and give great suggestions. So that's another way to try to raise your awareness and figure out opportunities to create an ERG in your company. And if it's not an ERG at first, maybe a caregiver support group. Get that started first, and that could lead to an ERG.
That makes sense. Do you feel like the stigma around letting HR know, letting your manager know that, hey, dad had this massive stroke and now I'm going to have to be going back and forth to North Carolina, that's not putting your career at risk by admitting that, hey, now my responsibilities have multiplied? And I've talked to even younger managers who kind of feel like at some point it's inevitable that you're going to have to quit working because, your parent needs help and, you can't do both. And it's like, that really makes me want to scream that, we got people in their 40s that are making these comments, like, we've got all these, return to office mandates, which I don't really think is the smartest choice, but one way that an employer can engender, what's that word? Oh no, it slipped my brain. Loyalty. There we go. God, I was going through all the L words. Is if they know what's going on, then they maybe could make some slightly different arrangements for you.
Yeah.
Because I've seen the arguments on both sides, being in the office, teamwork, camaraderie, collaboration. I personally don't need that kind of stuff. I can do that just fine over Zoom and everything else. But
so is there a risk of being stigmatized? Absolutely. Absolutely, there's a risk, especially with management that is ignorant or completely unaware of what a caregiver journey looks like. Absolutely. But isn't that the case for anything, that is kind of new and different? Somebody wants a flexible work schedule to be at home. Isn't there a stigma that, oh, you just want to go play golf for 2 hours, or you want to just, sit in your shorts all day long? But yet, isn't there data that will also reinforce that those individuals that are at home and have improved their personal lives are also being improved their work life. There's tons of research that is showing that. But I will answer your question this way. If you read her book, you'll read about Mel, and Mel was stigmatized in a different way. He was coming late to meetings Monday morning because he works in the city and he had to get across the river to New Jersey because his father has Parkinson's and his sister, who normally was the primary caregiver, has cancer and can no longer do it. So Mel, like myself, was immediately drafted to becoming a caregiver and was way over his head. But he would jump on a train and go to New Jersey, and he had to be at his manager's Monday morning meetings, 9 a.m. sharp, and he was always coming late to him. So instead of sharing with his manager what he was going through, why he was coming late to those, he was stigmatized. Is that right? Yeah. He was penalized. He was basically alleged to just be a poor performer, that he was lazy, that he didn't care. And so what's the worse? What's the better of the two scenarios? I'd rather take a risk and be stigmatized, but use that opportunity to educate and raise awareness with my manager. I will do a shameless plug. Just take our book and give it to your manager and then say, look, read this. And then I got something I need to share with you tomorrow. And I can assure you, it's going to go a lot better.
Because, back in my day, like I forgot, I had this conversation with some younger women, which isn't terribly hard because I'm not that much, not that young anymore. About there was a time I got second-degree sunburn on my ankle, and the CEO of our company was coming to our office to visit. And this was in the 80s when women wore pantyhose, and I could not put pantyhose on over that sun. And it was starting to get relaxed. This was before Casual Fridays, so it was starting to get relaxed. But I was like,
I can this. Yeah.
I don't understand. I was very nervous about not being, quote, dressed properly. So that's my corporate experience. I'm not a corporate groupie.
Yeah.
But I agree.
I do want to say one thing, though, Jen, because I do come from both sides of the world. I come from management. I come from non-management. I also come from HR. I will say this. I will always give management the benefit of the doubt. I always will give them at least a chance to educate them, raise their awareness. And then if they still act that way, well, then we just have a personality problem. It's not ignorance, right? But I have found in the work that Selma and I are doing, that managers are more than willing to be understanding, raise their awareness, be empathetic, be compassionate in this day and age.
Well, I would think if 73% of working people have some caregiving responsibility, that's got to bubble up to the top. That's not just the entry level and the lower level peoples, because that doesn't even make sense.
It's there, Jen. It's there. I will tell you, the last webinar that Selma and I conducted with an organization, there were about 8,000 employees. It was our biggest one yet in terms of impact. We've actually had one with 175,000 employees, but this one, the reason why the impact was huge is because the COO, who was a working caregiver and shared that with us, decided to join us on the webinar and share his story.
Oh, good.
Facilitated the discussion. You should have seen the chat room. The chat room blew up. There were, I'm not exaggerating, just hundreds of conversations going on. We couldn't keep up.
I believe it.
Good thing. That's a good thing.
Well, I would think, with the pandemic, I would think that we've kind of had a collective, crap can happen all the time and you never know. Like you said, you got drafted. My father, I tried to help my dad with my mom. He was never very open to that, which I still never understood. So when he died, it was like, oh crap, now what? And I was 50, and I was like, there's absolutely no way this woman is moving in with me because my photography studio was attached to my house. My daughter had just moved out the month before. I was like, oh, excuse me, but I'm ready for this phase of empty nest and doing my own thing. I'm not interested in 24/7 caregiving for my mom. And that had a lot to do with what I was doing and sibling issues. And that's a whole other episode. So So that gives me hope. That's good. That makes me feel a little bit better about HR in corporate America, because my HR experiences are not like what you were doing. So
I've heard that before, and I really do try to change people's mind that, look, just like management and employees, non-managers, HR, they're not all created equal. So
that's
don't take your last experience and make it your always experience. That's what I always like to
well,
say.
my last experience was a long time ago. So I'm very much open to believing that it's better. So let's shift to people like myself that left the workforce to care for somebody. Not that that's what I did, but kind of. For other people who have done that, how can they best position themselves? Because I'm assuming with AI reading resumes and cover letters and stuff, any kind of gap on your work history is not going to be great. So how can we, like I said, my dad died at 50, maybe, and my mom died 3 years later, so I was 53. Jesus, that's it's hard to imagine that it's been 5 years since my mom passed. It'll be 5 years this weekend.
Mm.
But how can somebody like myself that maybe had a 3 year gap, especially in our like late 40s, early 50s, how can we position ourselves to get back in the workforce, for another decade, maybe? I can do math.
So I love that question. I've been on a kick lately. Anybody who follows me on LinkedIn will know that I've posted about this a few times, that I encourage everyone to put, whether it's a gap or not, whether you're part-time or whether you were full-time, add the role caregiver into your LinkedIn profile and add the skill sets that you are using. Because I can almost assure you that if you're looking for a good project manager, you need to hire a working caregiver. If you're looking for someone to go to the Hill and advocate for your organization, you need to hire a working caregiver. If you need to find someone who is detail oriented and won't screw up little things like, medications or build pain or anything like that, you need to hire a working caregiver. So I encourage everyone. And I'm really happy to see that I've had people respond on my LinkedIn. You've encouraged me, and they went and they did it. They've changed their LinkedIn profile. So slowly, I want to do one LinkedIn connection at a time here a day. I'd like everyone to really reconsider that and put it on there with pride and really talk about and be honest, these skill sets that you've picked up. Um, I will tell you, I was not a very good attention to detail person, and I've become one. All it takes is just look at a benefit explanation of benefits from a Medicare
Cool.
document, and and everybody will say, "Oh, just toss it." No, 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 no.
Mm.
You better study those and study them well, because mistakes are made, and you'll pay for bills that you shouldn't be paying for. And so I have become very good at attention to detail. I've become very punctual where I never used to be when it comes to appointments, because people's time is valuable, including mine. I have become very resourceful. I mean, I now know also to say no. I used to always say yes. So I know to say no so I won't miss a deadline, or so I won't overcommit and underdeliver. And so whenever I go to an interview, if I was, I guess that's not going to happen anytime soon, but if I ever went back and interviewed for a job, I have a lot of stories and experiences to talk about during my gap or during my part-time work. So yeah, thank you, Jen. It's a great question. I encourage everybody, please, please rethink that. Put that in your resume. Put that in your LinkedIn profile. It's really not a bad thing anymore. It really isn't. Especially if you really think about the skill sets that future employer is looking for. Make sure you match them up with the skill sets that you have.
You can use AI to help take the skills you have and what they're looking for and kind of match them up, because AI is trained to do that kind of stuff, whereas we're a little bit more trained to self-doubt. And you can, once you've done that a couple times, then you'll be like, oh yeah. And what you're saying goes absolutely hand in hand with what I always say, is that caregivers should automatically get an honorary PhD, because we learn medical stuff, legal stuff, time management, advocacy, Um, 3 weeks ago, I was at the state capitol talking to legislative staffs about the Alzheimer's Association's bills for the state of California. Last week, I was at our congressperson's office advocating for the federal bills that the Alzheimer's Association would like.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about a people's skills building. Go talk to your congressperson that you would really like to see voted out, and smile and focus on what's important, not the 50 other things you want to nail him on. It's interesting. And I came home from that experience going, I feel this way about this person because they support these bills, but then they support stuff that's counterintuitive to these bills. I mean, I was so exhausted last week because I was thinking way too hard about all this advocacy, but it's fascinating and interesting. And there was 7 of us in his office, and it was a little heavy, all the different stories. And I thought, wow, anybody that can't support what these bills are asking for, well, well, this is a clean podcast, so we won't say that. But yeah,
but
you just learn a lot.
you raise a really you raise a really good point. I mean, there are actually a lot of good articles written about the crisis we're facing in this country, where there's a shortage of healthcare providers, the shortage of healthcare caregivers professional, and folks are being sent home from hospitals with hardly any guidance, and caregivers are having to pick up technical skills.
Yep.
I mean, when you have to clean out IVs and um, uh, clean out nebulizers and do, I mean, there's just, and shoot needles into your care recipient, your family loved one. I mean, that is a technical skill that you will be picking up if you don't already have it. That's a huge concern in this country right now, that family members are picking up that skill set that nurses have gone to school for
Yeah.
and have been trained for to do. So,
Yeah.
but I'm glad you asked that question. I hope I challenge everybody listening to this show today. Please go out there and look at your profiles and your resumes.
I love LinkedIn now more than the other platforms, with the exception of for fun, I do YouTube, but the rest of them I don't have a lot of need for at this point. But I'm really glad to get your point of view on, all of these different pieces of employment, because I've been doing this for 7 years. I'm gonna have to count. We're close to 400 episodes, and this is the second one that I've talked about employment. So I think we have one more scheduled for now. But yeah, it's important because life's life's not cheap. Some of us, lawyers, doctors, nurses, people that have gone to school for training, they don't want to just hang it up. Not everybody is designed, cut out to be a caregiver. So we need a lot more options. And I think this kind of conversation helps people see that maybe there are some options without giving up your career. It's a lot. We need a lot more solutions. So I really appreciate you coming on. Tell the listeners the name of the book again so I don't butcher it.
It's Working Caregivers, The Invisible Employees. Selma Archer and myself are authors. And you can just go to our website. It's probably the best way. We have tons of information on our website. And the best way to remember is it's Invisible Employees. I always get it wrong. Invisible Employees Book. All one word. Invisible Employees Book. If you put that in the search, you'll come up to our website. We have caregiver stories on there. We have podcast episodes on there. We've got some statistics and resources. And also we have a newsletter that you should subscribe to.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah, every 2 weeks we'll keep you updated. We've got a fascinating one coming out today about what Canada is doing. We had 3 Canadian caregiver advocate experts as a panel, and we spent an hour with them, and they've got some amazing, great things to share that we as a country need to talk more about with other countries and pick up best practices. I mean, I hate to say this, America, but we need to step up. We're like bottom of the industrialized countries in supporting working caregivers on a federal policy platform. So we need to do a better job of that. So we'll get there. I mean, people think that maternity leave has been around forever. And I was an HR guy back in the day when when women were afraid to have children and leave work because they knew they couldn't return, or they were stigmatized against. I mean, it was horrible, absolutely horrible. At least now we have some benefits, and now we even have paternity leave, right? So I think we're going to get to the caregiver leave. We're going to get there, and there's some companies out there that we hope to have on our podcast soon that are doing it. So congratulations to them for being leaders in that area. But thank you for having me on here, and thank you for all that you do, Jen.
Thank you. And just so the listeners don't have to remember the name of your website that you struggled with, it is hot linked in the show notes.
Oh,
but
great. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me, Zach. And to the rest of you, have a great afternoon.